All right, so let's just talk about this notion of political correctness. I just this was just out. This is, I guess, an interview from July, and I hadn't seen this, but I love it because this has been, and I guess Chomsky's been making this argument since even the mid '90s when it was all about we don't like political correctness, PC culture is bad, and this is stuff I've been saying, and I probably got it from Noam Chomsky maybe at one point, if not directly by osmosis, but he says it in a far more succinct way than I do. This is an interview with Chomsky from the July on, do we know what the name of the show is? Well, I think it's on the thing.
Do you regard political correctness, which is kind of a linguistic phenomenon, as a positive development in human existence, especially given what you said about the wrong assertion by Steven Pinker?
Well, let's take you and me. I suppose somebody put up a big advertisement, big bulletin board in Times Square, New York, saying, "Send the kikes to crematoria." I wouldn't like it. Would you like it?
Well, but Mel Gibson told Winona Ryder apparently, so you're an oven dodger. Now, my point is that
you're not answering my question. Would you like
it? To be honest, I prefer to have that being said, kike or oven dodger, than that not being said.
We should have big billboards in Times Square, New York, saying "kikes to the crematoria." Should we also have a statue of Hitler in the Berlin main square in Berlin? No. Political correctness says no, you shouldn't do that, and I agree with that, and I think you agree. Okay, this whole story began when some other ox started getting gored. Okay, as long as it was just things directed against the left, everything was fine. Now it's extending to some of the privileged people.
That's right.
So I have to get upset about it. Does it go too far? Sometimes, yes. But there's something very serious behind it. Take, say, Afro-Americans. They have suffered 400 years of vicious, hideous repression, unremitting, leaving a grim legacy. They don't like it when somebody calls them nigger or says, "Boy, come over here." Just like you and I don't like it if someone says, "Kikes go to crematoria." Now we call that political correctness because it's going after some of those lowly people.
I mean, that is ultimately what it is, right? It's someone else's ox is getting gored instead of the less powerful. Well, I mean, when we talk about political correctness, all we're saying is that, hey, the power dynamic has shifted a little bit, and things, the things that were inappropriate to say have expanded to include not attacking or demeaning or threatening certain segments of our society. That's all that's changed. There has always been things that you're not allowed to say in our society. It's just now that those things are expanded a little bit in terms of what is inappropriate to say. And it is expanding in a way that it has basically said, hey, the decorum that we've had here that didn't include, a prohibition against saying certain things to certain people. Well, now it does include that prohibition.
And part of the reason is because that group of people now has the right or privilege or space to determine what is to be said about them, the terms that are acceptable. Whereas the power dynamic before was those who were in power were determining how someone was to be distinguished, labeled, etc.
Absolutely. And those in power had their own set of things that you can't say.
Of course.
Right? You can't, like things that are inappropriate. And it's just now that has expanded and it's outside their control. It's all of a sudden PC or it's wokeness or whatever. And like the professor says, does it go too far? on occasion? Yes, like every other human dynamic.
Yes.
Like every other human dynamic. Do I wear my, does my son wear his mask too diligently? Yes, he does. He does. But I'm like, on balance, it's probably better he does that than less diligently. And is it going to have some negative impact on him that he wears a little too much? Yes, but less negative impact that he wears it too little. And I just use that as an example because that is basically it. It is, there is no precision in cultural change or emancipation for people or a change in the power dynamics in society. There's no perfect landing for these things. But on balance, it is simply about basic fairness and really taking into consideration that there are other human beings who exist in this sphere. And one set does not get to write the rules for everybody anymore.
Right. Now, with that being said, this is a completely different argument than that on the left about the weaponization of PC culture, cancel culture, whatever it is, to divide folks, not being used like in the most, for instance, like when Bernie's being called a racist by the neoliberals. When it's used as a weapon against the other, that's a completely different conversation, because I know people on the internet like to put these things together.
Conflate that notion of people are like, I'm not sure I follow
I mean, like the PC culture is used on the left to divide us through identity, through certain. I mean, there were. Sorry, my Siri just went off in the middle of this for some reason. Very strange. I've never been asked by Siri to do anything, and now I'm being asked by Siri. How do I stop this? That was really. Can you hear that?
No.
Going off? Oh, it's just a bunch of buzzing from Siri. No, I'm saying like, okay, so when Bernie Sanders was running for president and the Hillary Clinton campaign or the Biden campaign or whoever it was labeling him as a racist, that he didn't have, people of color supporting him, nitpicking certain things he said and using it as a weapon to divide and conquer. I mean, that is a form of PC culture, right?
No, I don't perceive that as PC culture. I see that as just simply a disingenuous attempt to create a wedge issue. I mean,
but I don't think that they think that. There were people who truly felt that Bernie was being critical or not respecting them, and they took one little snip and used it. And I do think that because of the factions they were in, they truly felt that way. That's
possible. But I think on some level that is a function of sort of saying like that is I think a cynical and disingenuous attempt to heighten a different perspective on how change happens, as opposed to and weaponizing that, as opposed to the idea of woke culture being something that is problematic in the context of colleges or in our society writ large. Yes, are there excesses? But again, it's like when you look at our society now and you rank, I mean, there's also a great clip that Chomsky has, and I think it is from a production of Manufacturing Consent. The way that consent and the way that corporations limit and define, and the way that news presents stories that limit the debate and set broad parameters that basically set you on a track so that only certain things can be discussed in certain contexts. It is in how you decide what you're going to attack and rate as the society's problem where this happens, right? Like, yes, I guess if you're on your college campus and there are people who are taking things a bit too far, then that becomes a prominent issue for you. But in terms of society, it's just simply not. It's simply not. Not even close. Not even close.
For instance, the trans bathrooms became an issue when the right wing refused to concede whatever language because it was like a loss for them in the cultural community, rather than like they're thinking it was some sort of left wing push for PC culture, whatever it is. That became a wedge issue for them.
Right. Well, I mean, for them, it became an assault on essentially the traditional, I would say, religious perspective on how the genders should comport themselves. And that gets into, like, dad's the head of the household, mom's, the neck that holds up the head.
Right.
Very important, but not the head. And that is the dynamic, I think, that they wanted to issue. And it was the idea that folks who have in the past been nothing but a joke or a object of discrimination or violence, and continue to be objects of violence in our society, or subjected to violence. The idea that they would be able to go to the bathroom in a way that they feel comfortable with is somehow, a wokeness, as opposed to, like, no, what it is, well, I mean, I guess on some level it is a wokeness insofar as it's a recognition that their humanity counts as much as your humanity.
Exactly. And the terms that they choose to be associated with, they have the right to determine how they are determined, essentially.
Yeah.
Classified in government. It's not up to the Christian male, in Indiana who's a Mike Pence listener